think part of my job, at least in my mission, is to the best of my ability, to experience the wonderfulness of people. I'm using wonderfulness. We could push it to the divine or stuff like that. But it's really, like the people. There's a wonderfulness about them, and to find that and to engage with them around that.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick Rodell. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reflections on Living Well podcast. Today, our guest is Rob Fisher. Rob is the author of Experiential Psychotherapy with Couples, a guide for creative pragmatists, and a number of book chapters and articles published internationally on couples therapy and the psychodynamic use of mindfulness for publications such as the Psychotherapy Networker, The Therapist, the Journal of Couples Therapy, the USA Body Psychotherapy Journal, and others. An advocate of the use of mindfulness and present experience in psychotherapy, he is an adjunct professor at JFK University. As the co-director of the Mindfulness and Compassion in Psychotherapy certificate program at the California Institute of Integral Studies, he has brought together many of the leaders in the realms of mindfulness and psychotherapy in one of the only programs in the United States that teaches not just the skills of psychotherapy, but helps participants develop their internal state as well. Teaching internationally, he is a Hakomi mindfulness-based experiential psychotherapy senior trainer and a director of Hakomi Institute of California and the Hakomi Institute of China. He lives in the Green Mountains of Vermont in an old farmhouse with his wife and chickens, where he writes poetry, fiction, and music. His novel, The Weeping Buddha, has recently been published. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Broderick.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm sitting here looking out across the meadow to the trees, and the rain is beginning to fall. And I like being indoors when that happens.
Well, that's great. You get to experience it through the window.
I know. I sometimes like being outdoors in the rain. Actually, if I think of living the good life, I remember one time I was in Cambodia, and I was looking at temples somewhere, and it started to rain, and it was really hot. It was like 110, and so the rain is just wonderful. The rain is warm, and we had a guide, and the guide said, "Oh, come, let's get under cover." And I said, no, I really want to be out in the rain. Because it evaporates immediately, and it's like monsoon rain is like so full and fertile and, nourishing to the earth. And I thought that was living the good life.
Nice. Oh yeah, we're definitely going to explore more of your perspective on that and the experiences in your life that has influenced that perspective. I know I just read that bio, but I would love to hear from you a little bit more about yourself and how you feel about yourself right now in this moment as an introduction to the audience.
That's a deep question.
I know, right? You have a few minutes.
Yeah, in a couple of minutes I'm going to get to all of it. Well, I'm happy doing this. It's the whole gestalt here of being in this old house and, in the middle of it's huge amount of incredibly beautiful nature, and then just being able to talk to you and talk to other people is nourishing to me. And there's something about human connection which is very important to me, and the quality of human connection. And I don't always get the kind of connection I'm hoping for. But sometimes I do, and this seems like this may be one of those moments.
Mm. Nice. I like that you're introducing yourself as a person who loves human connection, and um, I would think that that's going to be a part of your view of what the good life is. And so let's jump right on into it. What does living well mean to you?
Well, continuing in the same vein, then,
Hmm.
when we decided that we wanted to be out more in nature, we moved here 4+ years ago, pre-COVID. We decided to move, and we were happy we did once COVID came around. But we wanted to be around nature more and less congestion of human beings and everything that goes with that species. And so we got here, and the next day I went down to the post office. So we live outside, about 4 miles outside of a town of like 20 houses, maybe. And I'm very cute if you think of kind of old time Vermont, old houses all built in the 1800s. And so I go down to the post office, and there's the postmaster, and I say, I'm just checking to see if any mail has come for me yet, because we haven't set up the whole mail system yet. I said, I'm Rob Fisher. And he said, I know who you are. You got here last night. And I was so pleased that I think one of the diseases of contemporary world is anonymity. And the
Mm.
idea, and I know not everybody likes this. This is me personally. A lot of people want to be anonymous, but just to have somebody greet me and know who I am rather than go to some store where nobody knows me and I don't have any relationships with the people, it's a real pleasure to me. And when the UPS guy not only delivers the packages but brings us some of his garlic to share in the fall, so that we can plant good garlic in our garden. That I think is good living,
Mm.
and it pleases me a lot. So that's one aspect of it, for me, I think the important thing is in this part of it is being close to nature. And I spent time the first year we were here carving paths through the woods here. We have quite a bit of woods in back of the house up the hill, and there are these big boulders in it. So I decided to carve paths with cutting as little as I had to cut, like almost nothing, to create these paths, like mostly raking leaves away and marking the paths with temporary markers. And to create this pilgrimage from rock to rock, so I can go and into the woods in some way that it makes it easily accessible. I don't have to just bushwhack through the woods. And then at each rock, I have a cookie tin.
Mm.
And so you climb up the hill, get to a rock. There's a cookie tin. So what do you do with the cookie tins? You open it if you can. I tend to get like rusted shut over the winter. And inside there's a message from the rock, and so the rock tells you to focus on something. So and it's usually connected to the rock. So for instance, a rock with a big crack in it, and the message I was just refreshing all these yesterday because they get kind of rotten over time. And the message said, one rock with this big crack. It says, this rock has a crack in it. And as Leonard Cohen tells us, there's a crack in your heart that lets the light in. So what is the
Mm.
crack in your heart that lets the light in? So, the message is like that.
That's
So
awesome.
I like to play around with that. So nature is one piece. There's other pieces too I could talk about. That was the
Go
first
for
one.
it. Nature, and yeah, go for it.
The other is kind of is service.
Mm.
Um, at one point, I was going around uh, China. I was going to different temples, and I talked to the lamas, these Buddhist temples, mostly some Taoist, and said, "Well, in all your years of meditating, what you learned? Like, what's the most important thing?" And one guy that impressed me the most said, "I'd say the most important thing is service." So I like that. It kind of I, like everybody else, can get pretty self-absorbed. I have no doubt that I'm the center of the universe, and that's not always a happy condition. And so, there are lots of different ways to serve people. We have our neighbors here is a monastery, a Benedictine monastery, and and the monks who live there were really into. They're very private, but they have a lot of available attention when you talk to them. And I consider that an act of service. You and I were just talking about this before. People can just talk on and on and on, which I'm kind of doing. And they're able to listen. And I consider that an act of service.
Hmm.
There are many different ways. You can go feed the homeless if you want, but that's one of them where there's just these little. I finally wrote a poem to the postmaster and brought it to him, because I appreciated every time I go in there, he makes me happy.
Hmm.
And that's quite something. It's like he's better than a therapist. He and my mechanic. My mechanic is different. My mechanic is this grumpy guy, but I always feel included in his heart when I go there.
Hmm.
And I think that's an act of service too. So I don't need therapy. I just need to go to the mechanic and the postmaster, and I'm gonna be fine. So those are two things. I've been thinking about this, like that. What's a good life? And the third and last is. I'm sure I'll come up with more, but the third and last in my mind right now is being able to express and embody one's own uniqueness while being connected to other people. Which is different from I'm going to be myself and screw the rest of the world, but really be
Hmm.
connected with people and also offer who you are. Um, for connection. And I think that's super important as well.
Hmm. I love it. I love it, Rob. The first thing you said about being in a small town, I grew up in a small town,
Mm,
and you practically know everyone, and you see the same people regularly. You go to the store, even if you don't know them personally, you don't go to their homes, but you feel like you have a relationship with them
mm-hmm.
because you see them regularly, quite frequently. There's something beautiful about that. I miss that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's such an important piece of the equation for me as well, is to have those types of relationships, to be in community. And I think it is therapeutic. Even if the person may not even like you really,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a certain agreed upon. Um, I don't want to say affability because it's not really. I guess friendliness
Mm-hmm.
in that kind of world, because you're constantly seeing each other and acknowledging each other's existence. It feels good to be acknowledged. It feels good to be known, and I maybe for a lot of people they're not interested in that, especially if they grew up in a very urban environment where they just for some reason they just don't want that level of I guess interference in their life.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I know what that feels like, to feel like you're connected to so many other people. Even if you don't know them personally, you feel a connection with them
Yeah.
that I really don't get here. I finally live in a place a little bit outside of Berkeley, north of Berkeley, in a smaller town. I feel like now I finally know more of my neighbors than I've ever had in the past. Um, but I still miss that connection of going to the store, same store all the
Right.
time, connecting with those folks. I've had it a little bit because I think it's embedded in me. Even when I live in an urban environment, I go to the same store. If I get gas, I try to go to the same store to get gas, to find my few grocery stores I like to go to. And I'm consistent, a few restaurants, and I'm just a consistent person
Mm-hmm.
and try to establish some type of uh, relationship with those folks. And I'm with you on that.
Mm-hmm.
And also the uh, nature part. Being out in nature, I think we can probably talk a little bit more about that and the importance of being out in nature. I guess all of it is nature, everything is nature in a sense, but I guess the parts or aspects of nature that humans haven't um, manipulated as much, I should say.
Mhm.
There's something about that, being in that space, and I think that there's something beautiful about that. Hopefully, we'll say a little bit more about. And in service, I think it's interesting that you asked a monk about service, and I hear this quite often that some people suppose that a person that's a monk, they're they've distanced themselves, they've disconnected themselves away from people, and they're not doing service. And I love how you said that sometimes service is listening,
Mhm.
being present. Isn't it like the Freudian psychoanalysis is about listening?
Yeah, the talking cure involves listening on some other side.
Yeah, and someone's listening to you and holding that container, that space for you. I love that. I'm glad you brought that up about how a monk who tends to be by themselves for their practices, they're also doing a service to society by being present. I think they're doing a service to society just being the monk in and of themselves. But that's a metaphysical discussion
That is,
that
and
we can
I
talk
understand
about.
what you. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
And I think those are great. So nature, well, community indirectly, nature, service, and individuating. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle, so we can bring our gifts to the world and bring our full selves to the world, authentic selves to the world is an important piece of the puzzle. I think sometimes that gets confused with individualism and selfishness,
Mhm.
but actually, if we think about the body and the cells in the cells from their stem cells need to differentiate. They need to individuate and to develop into their full potential so they can serve the whole. A cancerous cell is a selfish, immature cell. So those are two different things. And people confuse that. Individuating or differentiating into your full nature is, I think, as well as an important piece of the puzzle. So those are some of my thoughts on what you just said. And if that make any sense to you, or if you
They do.
anything you want
I
to
like the
comment.
last thing. I like calling cancer cells immature. I think I will yell at the next one I meet and criticize it for being immature. But your point is that when you have individuation, then you can move in concert with the other cells.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mean, figuratively and literally, like in musical instruments, the violin is very different from the flute,
Yep.
and but they have to work in concert to make good music, and then it's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been studying classical music composition for God knows how many decades, and I still
Mm-hmm.
have no idea what I'm doing. But like as I have been writing a 4-part harmony with French horn and flute and violin and cello, and they're really different sounds, and they each place a different note at a different time, and have different cadence, and
Mm-hmm.
then you put them together, and they just sound great.
Mm-hmm. I
But
love
here's
that.
I want to read something. I want to read something. I
Yeah.
brought this with when I first came here. It's very short. When I first came here, the this we our property is bisected by a dirt road. Very few, there are few cars that go down it every day. One car kept going down it, and finally I was out there in the garden, and which means that I'm free game for anybody who wants to talk. And so people always stop and talk when I'm out there. And so I'm in the garden, this car stops, and it's plastered with um, bumper stickers, about, people's rights and, political stuff and all kind of human rights kind of bumper stickers. And there's this old lady in the car, and she introduces herself, and she's a neighbor. She's like 3 doors down, and she's a doctor. and um, and she says, "Hi, I'm Delore, and nice to meet you. Welcome to the neighborhood. I have stage 4 cancer, and I'm really supposed to be dead." That was her introduction, and so we really liked each other, and so we would get together a lot, often on the road. Sometimes she'd come over here, sometimes I'd come to her house, and and when I was over at her house, she had a little kind of poem hanging on her wall, and this is it. She gave it to me, and it epitomized her life, and also what I think this is the individuation piece, um, what she really embodied. I thought she was a saint. And in
Hmm.
fact, local people did too. Like, people had bumper stickers that said, "Do it for Delore." Her name was Delore, um, which is an interesting name because it means suffering.
Hmm.
Um, okay, here it is. I won't die with my song inside me. I sing every day my eclectic tune, arms wide, raw heart exposed. I laugh as I make up words, knowing I will find my way and persevere when my sweet song is reduced to a raspy whisper in moments of despair. But I sing, still I sing my song, sing. My song will not be caged, my radiant eyes will give it away. My song has broad flowing wings that effortlessly soar and fill the sky with wild colored sprinkles of me.
Love it.
So that's kind of full self-expression, and I would add to it, in concert with others.
Yeah. I love that. We all are. Poetry is such a beautiful thing. We all are song. We all are an expression of some kind of music. And I like how did she write that
She
or?
didn't write it. I haven't found the author.
Hmm.
I've researched it. I can find it online, but no attribution in
Hmm.
any one of the places I found it.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. There's so many different metaphors that we can use, but I love music and I like that idea of we are all each a song, and how do we fully express our song into the world, our
Yeah.
voice, our musicality into the world. I think that's beautiful. Yeah, I love how you brought up the analogy of music and the harmony of music and relating that to the harmony of the cells in the body. When, I don't know much about an orchestra or classical music, but I play music with people and understand the importance of each person playing their part and when they've really cultivated that instrument or their part, it really brings about a certain level of beauty and harmony in the whole. And I think sometimes, again, I hear this quite often. Maybe I've heard it recently, and that's why it's on my mind now. That sometimes, you know, when we think about, so within the context of the whole, like you reminded us at the end of that okay, express our full song, our full selves, but within the context of the whole, how important that is to the whole. You got to have both. You got to have this individuation, this differentiation. Um, and think about when you're playing music and someone is just not adept at the instrument or immature at playing the instrument. Not that something's wrong with them, it's just immature at playing the instrument. It just doesn't quite sound the same as someone who's really fully developed their capacity to play that instrument, play the role in that orchestra. So, that's such an important piece of the puzzle is that we have to develop ourselves. This is what I think anyway. I think my number one job is to fully develop myself, to differentiate within the context of the whole, though. It is my responsibility to individuate, to develop myself, to differentiate, to from the entirety of my life. The way I see it um, is a life of self cultivation and development, all the way to the end. I always have room to develop my capacity to. I use the word love because love is my primary uh, principle or the main value for me, that guiding principle, because it speaks, because love suggests that there are others to make connection with. It is my responsibility to develop my song or to develop my capacity to play my role in the world so that I can enhance that capacity for harmony and love in the world. I can give, I can serve better as I evolve and develop myself. I just think that's such an important piece of the puzzle, and it's not selfish to focus on self development, self cultivation. I think the issue that maybe some people have is within what context are you doing that? Are you evolving and developing your capacity to be selfish? Or are you evolving and developing your capacity to be selfless? And I think that those are two different things. And for me, it's important to evolve and develop my capacity to be selfless. Even though I'm focusing on self development, but I'm doing it in service of something greater than myself. If that makes any sense to you, I'm just kind of rambling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also when I think about service and selflessness, I think our world, particularly here, well, not just here, I teach a lot internationally, so I can end up going between cultures, and I have a wife from a completely different culture and race, and so I'm sensitive to all the different kinds of experiences people have in the world, really different from my own. It's so easy to think, oh yeah, everybody must experience life like me, but it's not really true, is it? But it's easy, it's easy, particularly, being kind of in a majority dominant kind of group in this country, it's easy to kind of forget, like, other people have such different experiences, being in the world. But I think one common experience that people have is people feel bad about themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't feel recognized. And I remember many years ago, I went to see a spiritual teacher, and I didn't become her disciple or anything like that, but all that she was doing at the time was people would come up and she'd hug them, and and
Oh yeah.
and my experience of her at that time was that she experienced me as a piece of the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And so, kind of, I in a way I was reflected in her eyes, and as opposed to other people who kind of can experience me as an impediment, or I'm wrong, or all the other stuff, stupid, or an old guy, or whatever it is. So I think that's really important. I learned something there about how to approach other people. And so I think part of my job, at least in my mission, is to the best of my ability, to experience the wonderfulness of people. I'm using
Mm-hmm.
wonderfulness. We could push it to the divine, or stuff like that. But it's really, like, the people. There's a wonderfulness about them, and to find that, and to engage with them around that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember actually once I was teaching at College of Marin. I lived in the Bay Area a long time. I was teaching at College of Marin. In order to teach, I had to be fingerprinted. And so I made an appointment with the local police department and went 11:30 fingerprinting. So I go down there, and habitually late. So it's 11:40. I go in there, and the guy says, "Look, you were supposed to be here at 11:30. It's 11:40. Forget it." And I was thinking, God, I really have to get this done. And what do I do? And I said, "Oh, is that the fingerprinting machine back in there?" And he said, yeah. He said, brand new. I said, wow, it looks really cool. Tell me about it. And so he told me about it. And then he looks at me and said, why don't you come on in? We'll do it. It'll only take a moment. But it was that moment of kind of creating some kind of relationship with this grumpy guy. He had all the power, and he's grumpy. But I think kind of creating a relationship that evokes the best in people.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with everybody. I found out, like, there's certain people who try to take advantage of you, if you do that, but so you have to be careful, and you have to know when to carry a sword and when to carry a feather. So, but that the principle stands, and that I'm interested in evoking the best in people, partly because I want to live in a world that's safe. There's personal interest in that. But I think that if we can do that, it makes the world a better place, like a person at a time, basically.
Yeah. Boy, I'm so glad you brought that up. Excuse me. I'm so glad you brought that up because, yeah, seeing the best in people to the best of our ability. And the thing that I love that you clarified that we also have to be careful with that too, because there are people out there who will take advantage of that. And if we try to see the light in another, and I think that light exists, but that other has to be receptive to that, to someone seeing the light in them. And what I mean by that is someone has to be ready. So obviously, this person, they were grumpy, but they were receptive. They were receptive to you, shining the light on them in that manner, in the way that you did it. Some people are not. And I think that is an important thing that I've made that. I won't say I've made a mistake. I've had to learn that.
You learned
That
through the mistakes.
yeah, I have had to learn that one for sure. Where I'm like, wow, there are people out there who are so damaged inside that they'll take advantage of someone's kindness. That is a real thing, folks. It doesn't mean that you give up on being kind and loving and showing or sharing and opening up yourselves to reflect back someone else's light or their goodness and seeing that in them. But it's also being um, rational and reasonable in the world where there are people who may be engaged in behavior, or they have a worldview that has been molded by their experience that is not healthy and not friendly. That's a real thing. It doesn't mean that you disregard or hate them. It's just that you're being mindful and careful of the energy that you're around. Because, again, I love the cancer analogy because cancer, that's what cancer is, a cell that just hadn't differentiated and gotten selfish and immature. There are a lot of people out there who just haven't fully developed. Well, I think all of us haven't fully developed, but I think that there are some of us that's a little bit more differentiated than others, and some people are not differentiated, because of whatever situation that they've grown up in their environment that didn't nurture their development. And so, I think that, yeah, that's an important caveat that you offered in that.
Well, I think you said it well, and that some people are really wounded,
Yeah, that's it. Exactly.
and 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 you have to take it seriously. At number one, seriously means be compassionate and also be careful.
Yeah.
And I was traveling. I was traveling a long distance. The first leg of the trip was uh, San Francisco to Washington, and I have a middle seat. It's not my favorite thing. But next to me, sitting already sitting there, is this nice woman who's a doctor. And I think, oh, we can have a nice conversation. She seemed very pleasant and communicative. And I'm just settling in and beginning to enjoy myself despite the middle seat. And who should sit next to me but this huge guy with a military haircut, and who is like big enough to occupy his seat and part of mine, and he like takes over all the armrests, and he's on his cell phone with probably a girlfriend, and they're having a fight. And so they're having a fight, um, and while they're doing it, this little old lady who looks like an 80-year-old nun is like trying to put her pocketbook above in the compartment. She's like struggling to get it up, and obviously she's irritating this guy. And for him, he turns to her and says, "Just don't touch my helmets." And so I'm thinking, oh God, I have to sit next to this guy, like for a 5-hour trip, to the East Coast. And then he pulls out a magazine and he's reading the magazine, and like I'm compulsively curious, and so I'm like trying to figure out what he's reading, because I'd never seen a magazine like this. It was a magazine of military of weapons that you can buy. So he was an arms dealer, and and so I'm like peering over, and finally he like looks over at me, and I think, oh shit, now I'm in big trouble. and he says, I can't remember what his opening line was, but it was very sweet. And he finally says, "Well, what do you do for a living?" And I said, "Well, I'm a psychotherapist." He said, "Oh, well, then you must know about PTSD." And I said, "Yeah, I teach some stuff about it. I know about it." He said, "Well, I've got it really bad." He finally slams the phone down, with his girlfriend. And that's when he turns to me and he said, "I've got it really bad." And I said, "Oh, that's hard, huh?" And he said, "Yeah, all my buddies have it." And he said, and then he says, 3 of them, are alcoholics, 2 killed themselves, and and he said, so we started talking about it. He said, "Yeah, you see my face, like half of my face, a third of my face was blown off in Iraq." And he said, "This is reconstructed. This is reconstructed." And I said, "Wow." And he said, "Yeah, I went back for a 3rd tour of duty." I said, "Why did you do that? I mean, why would you go back after you've been blown up? He's blown up twice. Why would you go back?" He said, "I couldn't imagine my buddies being over there and me not being with them." So I'm seeing this whole, first time there's this total prejudice about this guy. I've already concluded he's less than human. And then, like, he's beginning to tell me his story. It was his awful story. And we spent the whole plane. I didn't talk to the doctor at all. I talked to him the whole time because he was so interesting and he was so vulnerable. There's this like exterior, this like super tough guy, super angry, and then underneath that was the PTSD, and underneath that was this kind of love of his buddies. And I was very touched, and I exchanged numbers, and I get kind of some references to, he was trying to do like an ineffective way of dealing with PTSD, and so I gave him some referrals of how he could get some help with that. And I still remember him. I still have a place in my heart, for this guy. It was so different. I mean, we lived in completely different worlds, and I was prejudiced to start off, about him, and put him in the other category, of those people. But I learned something.
Yeah, what a beautiful story there. Yeah, we never know. That's a good lesson for the good life, right? Be careful of our judgments. The judgment is going to rise. Well, your mindfulness teacher, our
Yeah.
mind is going to come up with all kinds of stuff. It's a matter of what do we grab on? And if you would have just grabbed on your prejudice, wow, you'd have missed out on that conversation you had with someone.
Yeah.
And you never know. You end up providing him with some service, some tips and some information that could possibly help him. Or just having a conversation with him could have been helpful to him, and it seems like it was helpful to you.
It was.
And here you are, you're sharing that story with me, and there's an audience out there who's going to listen to that story. I think that's a lesson in it. That's a lesson in life of right there about how to not being careful not to pass judgment. Be careful of a situation you find yourself in, but be mindful of our assumptions and open ourselves to possibilities, but have some boundaries, of course, but be open to the possibility, because we don't know what's on the other end of that. And I think that's a beautiful lesson right there. in and of itself. So you've mentioned this, and just your background. I can't help but to ask you this: what role does, how should I ask this question? What role does psychotherapy play in the good life, or the various tools that psychotherapy offers in supporting your take on the good life
That's an interesting question.
or living well?
Yeah. There's so many different forms of psychotherapy,
Mm-hmm.
and they have different purposes. The different theoretical orientations. So, I've taught this stuff for like so many decades, I can't remember. But I can still remember pretty well. Um, like it's the profession started in a medical model. Like people were sick and they needed to be cured. There's pathology, they need to be cured, and I studied some of those models early on, and eventually I decided that really good therapy is about the being a midwife for the emergence of the spirit, or of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not so much interested in curing problems as I am in creating an environment where people can fully embody themselves. So it's a kind of a I think that it's fine. There's certain techniques which are really helpful. You're stuck in some kind of a loop, and there's certain forms of therapy which are helpful in getting you unstuck from that, and so that can help you have a better life. But I'm mostly interested in kind of the unfolding of the soul, like being a
Mm-hmm.
midwife for the unfolding of the soul. That's much more interesting to me. And so that's a particular corner of the field. That's not the field, but I feel like it's the important part of it. And part of that is for me as a therapist, is my ability to see people, to see their wonderfulness, as we were talking about before, not to ignore the part that they're suffering. Everybody suffers. We're all in the suffering club. It's a good club.
Yeah.
Everybody's welcome. Um, so, but to see about creating like a garden where people can come into themselves and they can have themselves, their goodness, mirrored back. I think that's super important. It's what I don't know if it's better than anything else, but it's what I'm interested in, and what I'm interested in providing for people. And in Hakomi, one of the things we teach is tracking, which is notice. It's basically mindfulness turned outwards. So kind of noticing what's happening in the present moment. Like you just shifted the angle of your head. That kind of thing. And noticing I was in a consultation group recently, and I was noticing like this woman who likes, every time she likes to wear oversized sweaters and shirts, which come down to her knuckles on her hand, and what kind of world does she live in?
Mm-hmm.
That's her taste. Nothing wrong or right about it, but there's something about that she portrays. She kind of portrays herself as smaller, like she wears oversized clothes so she can be smaller. Like noticing those kind of fine-grained details of what's happening in the present moment is very magical, because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the depth of people's psyches is immediately visible if you're paying attention. And
Yep.
it's like dog shit reality. It's like not coming up with these complicated concepts, but noticing the length of somebody's shirt, or the kind of background they have. The kind of background somebody has tells you something about them. You like
Mm-hmm.
plants, like they've got a couple of plants like in back of you. This are important. Of all things you could have had swords in your background, but you didn't. Books and plants. That tells us
Mm-hmm.
something about you, right?
Yeah.
I have like wallpaper that looks like comes out of like the 1700s, so it tells you I'm living in the wrong century.
Oh, I love it. Love it. Yeah, that's great. I think that, yeah, there's a role to help people clarify whatever thing that's going on in their lives through these various psychotherapeutic techniques or tools, theories, and maps, whatever you want to call them, metaphors, and all that stuff to help people. But I always like help people in what way? And I think that you are drawing on, you're looking at it from the perspective of how do I create favorable conditions in my relationship with another person, in my interaction with them,
Yeah.
such that they can see their wonderfulness, or see their soul, their inner light. There's something that transcends all the various psychological processes. There's something to each of us that is remarkable and beautiful and wonderful. And I love how you see psychotherapy as a means to help unravel that or help bring that out in some capacity. I think that's just great. That's great stuff. At the end of the day, and I feel like I'm with you. That's like the most important thing, isn't it? Like this guy, this gentleman has had significant PTSD. But what is it about the soul, the light inside of this person that's willing to go back into a violent situation that's very dangerous out of the care for his fellow human being, on one side of it, at least his
So,
fellow
yeah.
is one side of it. One can argue like, oh, he's going to kill and blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, you can look at it that way, but also look at something else that's going on there. Look at that wonderful aspect of this human being. Yeah, they have in a magazine, an arms dealer, and arms weapons are designed to take life. Being in the military, your job is to take another life. But it's not. That's not all of it. You have comrades. You have other individuals that your friends that you care about, that you're willing to put yourself in a dangerous situation out of love for your fellow human being. There's something to that. There's something to shine. I think it's important to shine a light on something like that. It's such an important piece of being a human being. Being a human being is a complex, complicated thing. At least at this phase of our evolution as a species, there's violence, there's wars. I may not want it to be, but that's the world as it is. And how do we find the light in it and try to shine the light on that which is beautiful to make the world a better place? I don't know. I'm not a therapist, but that's what I feel like. I love that you said that, because I feel like when I recommend people to go see therapists or to see a therapist or to do something around helping you clarify these various psychological processes, yeah, there's tons of different models and maps out there, but doing something to help you better understand yourself such that you can illuminate your light into the world, illuminate your soul into the world. That's an important piece of the puzzle to live in a good life in our modern world of crazy making. I think if you don't see a therapist, but those therapeutic tools, those various tools in that toolkit can be very beneficial, even if you're doing it with yourself. Or I think anybody can do parts work with themselves if they learn how to do it. For instance, that's not all that's needed, but having someone sit there and listen to you, it can be very therapeutic. Do you need a therapist? Maybe not. A lot of people do, because not a lot of us know how to hold that space for people. Not a lot of people know how to sit and listen to you, or hold that container for you. So I don't know. I just think therapy and the whole psychotherapy movement is an important piece of helping us evolve as a species. I really do believe that. And to know that there are therapists like you who see it in that way, at least that's what how I'm interpreting what you're saying. To see that, yeah, I want to help someone see their light and see their beauty. And if I just think that's an important piece of helping or servicing society and moving society and culture in that direction towards more love in the world.
And there are many different forms of therapy.
Yeah.
Like we have a barn across the road here near the garden. Barn was kind of neglected, built in 1820 roughly, and neglected, didn't have any kind of floor. And so I got a grant from the state, put in a floor in the barn. And
Hmm.
because I thought, I think that people need to have joy in their lives. So a floor in the barn means you can have a band and you can have a
Mm.
barn dance. And I think that's as effective a form of therapy as anything else. So got these musicians and people, get local community out here, and we can dance together. You don't even have to talk. As my little dog used to say, you humans really overrate the use of words. It just gets you into trouble. and she was case in point. She was very loving, and people would come up to her on the sidewalk and declare their love for her and stuff like that. And she never spoke a word. So I think that's a form of dance of therapy. Music in
Yeah.
general, I think,
Oh,
is a form of therapy. Listening to it, playing it together with other people. Poetry, as we talked
mm-hmm.
about before, and uh, when I was in 8th grade, we were studying Greek drama, and so there was this cathartic drama. So this was the beginning of becoming a therapist, psychotherapist. And the form of therapy was that people would go to these dramas and they'd cry, and they'd get angry, and they'd yell, and they were cathartic. And I was really interested in this. How do you do that? How do you write something like that? And so uh, I kept, I've written a bunch of nonfiction stuff, so I know how to outline and how to make sense. But how do you evoke people's feelings?
Mm-hmm.
And so then I wrote Weeping Buddha, and I found out how to write, and it's different from writing linearly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I say the last, when I finally really got my stride in it, I think every time I wrote the last third of the book, I cried.
Mm.
And like the characters were so real to me, and their interacting and what would happen to them, and it was so touching, the writing of it, and that I think you can create these worlds through fiction, also that help, that touch people, and they enliven people or inspire people or bring them more in touch with their emotional world, things like that. That
Mm-hmm.
I think that's other forms of therapy.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, I love it.
I see we're coming to the end of time here.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
if you want, I will read you one more poem that I wrote that is
Mm-hmm.
about a lot of what we talked about. It might make a nice summary. You might want to say something first. I don't know.
Yeah. I this has been great, by the way, and we still have about 5 more minutes here. I want to, if you don't mind, it would be great to close with.
Okay.
Would that poem be something nice
Yes, absolutely.
to close with? And yeah, I just think that I'm glad you brought up that there are different means, different forms of therapy, different ways and means to support human well-being. I love that you brought those up. But before I know we're near the end, and I just want to ask because I think there's value in this. What led you to see things this way? Is there something in your life? Was there any major event, or I know you mentioned something about the theater stuff, but what led you to therapy, or what led you to see the world, see your view on living well this way?
Mm. There are a lot of influences. I grew up as the child of Holocaust victims,
Mm,
so I knew a lot about hatred and fear.
Mm-hmm.
and kind of people who weren't that well put together, but were basically loving parents, but not great in a lot of ways.
Mm.
So I knew a lot about the other side of things. I literally, and I question if this is even true, but I'm sure I'm not making it up. My mother's bedtime stories um, were about the Holocaust, basically.
Mm.
That's what she'd tell me. That's what I go to sleep with. It's amazing I
Mm.
can sleep. Um, so I know a lot about the dark side of things, and I think that's a big influence. And then and there are a lot of little experiences. I remember once when I was 15 or 16, I went to visit this girl I was in love with, Gail, and and we were talking one day, and she said, you do most of the talking, I do most of the listening. And I thought, oh God, I can't believe that's true. But it was true. And there's no arguing with it. I just thought, oh, I can't believe that I'm doing that. And then like it was like a switch got turned. Um, that I thought, okay, it's time to start listening. So I think there are little experiences like that, or going up to Maine in the summers and, going out and collecting eggs with Bert Kennedy, the farmer, and, being close to nature and hanging out with the sheep and the apples, falling off the apple tree. And so I think those were a lot of early things. There are some spiritual influences from the Quakers and from, it's like sitting in community in silence in nature, for instance. Like I learned how to do that. That was very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I lived in India for a while, and you know, uh, I got a sense of the different flavors of different Indian religions and that that opening up to something greater, in lots of different ways, and um, that are often very different from the way we do things in the West. And so a lot of, even now, on in the evenings I often go. They're kind of go down to the Benedictine monks, and they sing at 8 o'clock. They go sing to you. You go sit in the chapel. They come out and they sing to you. So I go see the Benedictines in the evenings, and on Sundays sometimes I go see the Quakers, and on Friday nights I go to the synagogue.
Nice.
So I think those are all in there also.
I love it. I love that. The reason why I asked that question too is because sometimes when I know for me, when I listen to someone tell a little bit about their story, how they got there, kind of helps me reflect on my own story. Um, a lot of times, like the darkness, the Holocaust, and having parents who survived it and traumatized by it. Obviously, if they're reading bedtime stories about the Holocaust to their children, to their child at least, you can imagine that pain. And so that pain, sometimes our suffering, our pain, can be fertilizer for uh, helping us see things in another way. But not only did you share those moments of challenge, but there are also beautiful moments. Being out on the farm, picking up eggs, out in nature. I think seeing different cultures and different worldviews about the nature of spirit or the divine or whatever it may be. All those different influences, and taking all those different influences and I guess writing your narrative, writing your story from all of those different influences. I think we all do that. I think it's a lesson for all of us that when we reflect on our lives, how do we put the pieces together or look at how all these different things have influenced us, and how can we, with some awareness, I guess, with mindfulness, look at those experiences and use them as tools or means to clarify our view about what life is all about and how to take all of that stuff. and use it as a means to help us live a good life and live a better life, whatever that means to each one of us. This has been great, Rob. I have enjoyed I love the calmness that you bring to the conversation. I just absolutely love that. It's been a very pleasant conversation. And yeah, I'm lucky. I get to talk to such wonderful people, um, and I literally would love to have you come back on this and talk about some other things in particular, about your therapeutic ideas, whatever, poetry, your art, music. I'm open to it all. I think you're such a wonderful person to speak with. It's therapeutic just to talk with you.
Well, thank you.
Seriously, it's just been what I needed today in having this conversation with you. So we are, near the end here, and I'd like to ask people to share any final thoughts or words that they like to share, and then you can say a little bit more about that and read your poem and say something about the poem afterwards. It's up to you.
Okay. Well, final words are I've appreciated your warmth and your gentleness and your kindness in who you are here, and so, a receptivity in that. And I'm happier now than I was before our conversation. So my life is a little bit better.
Awesome. Me too.
Um, this poem, let's see if I can pull it up here. Ah, it's amazing when this technology works. I actually wrote to a class I was teaching at JFK University, a graduate class. And I think I was teaching marriage and family therapy to them. I was very impressed. It was my second class. And I'll start off the semester thinking, like, who are these people? Like, I don't know you. Like, I don't even like you. Like, I'm scared of you. Like, stuff like that. And then by the end of the semester, and this happened every single time, I think they're like just incredible. Like, how did I luck out, to handle, to be given a group of people like this? So I wrote it for them. And I think it kind of distills a lot of what we talked about here today. So I'll read it. It's not very long. It's called If You Forget. If you forget how beautiful you are, I will remember. I will remember your barefoot connection to the earth, the risks you have taken, and the compassion in your heart. I will remember the courage of your questions and the tiny wrinkles that make your bright and shining eyes so welcoming. I will remember how you shine in your enthusiasm, your delicate embarrassment, the passion and serious intensity behind your words. If you forget, come with me. There's a path I know high up on the mountain and deep in the core of the rich black earth, where we can drink together from the pool of your tears and listen as the mountains echo with the sound of your laughter. If you forget, I will taste one more time the deep, dark sweetness of your soul, that wonderful essence that belongs only to you. If you're tired, come rest in the warmth of my hands, and I'll whisper stories of your greatness in your ears. Oh, how I'm intoxicated by the flavors of your soul.
Beautiful, Rob. Oh, so good. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that poem. And if you don't mind, if I would love to put that in the show notes. If
Sure.
you don't mind sharing that, that
Yeah.
would be great, for the audience and for me. Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much again for taking the time out of your day to share your wisdom. Yeah, just your soul, your presence with us today. I really, really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. It was a pleasure being here for me.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.